Hello, everyone. I'm Eddie Stone. Welcome to today's live. It is Thursday, and I'm actually broadcasting today from the family playroom. You can see, as part of our theme, I'm sitting on the family table tennis table. Used to get used a lot when the kids were here, not so much anymore. I regret that. There's a lot of ping pong battling going on back in the day, and we are joined by international table tennis champion, brand ambassador for Touchstone, and budding Hollywood star. I'll get into that in just a few moments. Matt Hetherington. Matt, how are you?
I'm good. I'm doing surprisingly good considering the circumstances. Everything's been going pretty well.
I've been trying to keep up a little bit on what's going on social media. It does seem like you've, like the rest of us, right? You've been pinned in there, so you look great.
Yeah. And, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. and thank you for taking some time. So for those that don't know, Matt has been a brand ambassador for us for several years.
2 years. 2 years now.
Yeah, and I've actually had a chance to be with Matt. He actually was involved with a tournament here in our local area, in the Cary, Raleigh-Durham area, and so we've it's been a long time, and I've enjoyed watching how things have progressed for him. A lot of fun stuff. So Matt, thank you for being here.
Oh, anytime.
Yeah. So you've become a real inspiration for me. You have battled some very serious health issues, and I really, sort of reading your comments and stuff on social media, I know that you're an inspiration for a lot of other people. But before we get into all of that, for those that don't know you, do you mind sharing a little bit about your table tennis journey and sort of how this started and where you're at today?
Yeah, I started playing table tennis in New Zealand, so that's where I grew up, and started playing very socially. I guess I would have been about 8 years old.
Oh wow!
And where I grew up was they didn't have too many resources for table tennis. There weren't too many strong coaches or practice groups or training partners. So I was lucky in the beginning that there were a handful of people there to kind of get me into it. I would say by the time I was 11 or 12, most of those people had kind of vanished. So for the most part, I was playing for the next 6 years with pensioners and hobby players down at the club, and just it was quite a grind learning how to play the sport. But when you're in a situation like that, and you just keep playing, that kind of tells you that there's something that attaches you to the game. Sure. So after I moved to a different city and I went to university, you kind of get to the point where you're like, well, is it time now to stop with this, or is it an opportunity to really make something more of it? And at that point, I just felt like I'd invested so much time into the sport without really having the same opportunities as everyone else, that it was a good chance for me to at least try and do something with it. And it kind of blossomed from there. I don't know if I had this kind of crazy vision of getting into a career in the sport and being able to keep playing, being able to coach, not having too much pressure to work in an office, and be able to do projects and work my own hours and have that freedom. And granted, at the time, most people thought I was insane, but here I am. I somewhat made it, so that worked out. And I managed to play some relatively big international events, and I've coached at some international events as well. So it's kind of, I feel like I've had the best of everything that I wanted to get to, so it's been good. And of course, I still love the sport, so that's the main thing.
Yeah, it's important to love what you do. And listen, early on, as I got to know you, I realized that journey you took, right, when you didn't have all the coaching or the environment absolutely perfect, right, to incubate that level of player. You had that drive inside. I'm sure that's what helped you.
I did. I was insane.
Well, listen, I think oftentimes those that are doing the most interesting stuff in the world, or people look at them going, are you a little crazy? Maybe.
Yeah, you have to be. You have to be.
Right.
I encourage people, anybody who's passionate about something, that has a lot of barriers or obstacles. I think one of the things that I said that really made the most sense to me was, at some point you're going to have to make completely irrational decisions. You're going to have to do things that in your head just make no sense. And for me, it was moving to the US, and I made that decision basically on a coin flip. You know, I got offered to come back here and practice at a club, and train here a little bit more, and I basically said yes on the spot. So that's how all of this started. And I think moving to the US was a really big step for me, that if I hadn't taken it and if I'd stayed in New Zealand, then I would be in a very different situation to where I am now. Sure. Would I consider it to be a rational decision? Absolutely not. You know, it was a very crazy, somewhat spontaneous decision. But you know, you just got to jump on those opportunities.
Yeah, for me, those types of risk takers, when they're taking measure of things, right? You weren't necessarily risking life and limb, right? It's just career decisions, but to be able to have that perspective, say, I've got this dream, I've got to take some chances to get there. I mean, I think that's everyday life. It's certainly a big part of our type of work. So I love it. That's not the only reason you're an inspiration to me, but I love that aspect of your journey. Now, I keep up with what you do, right? I watch the YouTubes and things like that. Not only are you an incredible trick shot aficionado, right? And you call the games, but now it seems like you've got this draw from Hollywood. I've seen you in YouTubes with Kevin Hart and some of his cohorts, and then there were some things that you did relative to The Voice. And so looks like a lot of fun. Tell us a little bit about those experiences and how that happened.
One of the things about table tennis that we always found, and this is, you know, while I was working with USA Table Tennis, I was doing a lot of media and PR with the Olympic athletes. And there is a huge surge in interest in the smaller, maybe less significant sports in an Olympic year. So every 4 years, the US goes nuts about table tennis because it's going to be at the Olympics. And it kind of opens up all of these doors. You know, there are people who want to feature different Olympic sports on their shows, and they want to try out some sports that don't often get the limelight. You know, it's kind of a unique opportunity. So, I was kind of involved in organizing different athletes to go to those opportunities when they reached out to us, and tagged along myself. And the first time it ended up that I was actually I ended up being the coach, playing the role of the coach in that was in What the Fit with Kevin Hart and Keegan-Michael Key. Yeah. But, you know, I mean, meeting those guys is, you really have to just hit the ground running and try your best not to be starstruck. Because if you stand there, you know, with your mouth shut and wide-eyed, then you're going to miss out on the opportunity. So I always try to just make the best of it, communicate with them, get to know them a little bit. And they were all, both of them, and then Nick Jonas with The Voice, were really, really humble and down to earth, and very grateful for us taking our time to be there with them. But it was always when I came to the US, it was a huge goal of mine. And again, I had my head in the clouds a bit, which is great. But I always thought it would be really cool to try and link up with celebrities and maybe teach them table tennis. And, you know, I feel like table tennis deserves more profile. And I thought, given the number of celebrities that play table tennis, you know, whether it's in the backstage or their green room, all those different things, it would be a good chance to give table tennis a bit more exposure. And they were great opportunities. I would love to have more. If it happens, it happens. We'll see. I'll keep working hard.
Yeah. I have to imagine if it's like a lot of folks I'm around, right, that are successful, right? They've got a little ego. Did any of them ever try to test you on the table and say, "Oh, let's have a real game here to see what their skill set was"?
Yeah. Kevin Hart was hilarious. So when I posed the question to them both, what do you know about table tennis? He said everything. So he kind of challenged me from the start. You know, he played the role of the expert. But But you know, at the end of the day, once they've come off the table, they're pretty quiet. They're a bit more humble than they are at the start.
I imagine so. I will not make that mistake. I may ask you for a lesson some point, but I will not make that mistake. So let's switch gears for a moment, because the other part of your journey that you utilized your same amount of determination, sort of fighting some odds, right, and headwind, and really sort of taking the opportunities in front of you, however difficult they were, and embrace them and challenge them, is the fact that you've had these health issues. And in fact, on your social media profiles, you list yourself as an autoimmune athlete. The first thing is, what do you mean when you say that? And then I want to talk about your journey.
So obviously for me, I have these genetic family kind of hereditary autoimmune conditions. So I was diagnosed with one in 2013, and then partially diagnosed with a second one in 2018. But after I started taking a certain kind of immune suppressant therapy, all the symptoms went away. So that one hasn't reared its ugly head again. But basically, I think there are something like 25 million people in the US alone that have autoimmune conditions. So it's essentially your immune system has had some kind of malfunction where it now recognizes particular body cells in different parts of your body as being foreign or being enemy. And of course, your immune system has a memory. So once that happens, it can't really be reversed, or it's something they haven't figured out how to reverse yet. So, you know, when you have flare-ups, there's a lot of internal inflammation, quite a significant amount of pain, and it just drains your energy when your body is constantly fighting against itself. I mean, some of the relapses, I would say they took me around 3 months, 3 or 4 months to recover from fully. And you know, when you're trying to train and practice and compete, 3 or 4 months out of a year is pretty significant. So the main battle for me, aside from trying to figure out how I could manage them better, was having to continuously pour so much effort into my table tennis training and kind of be looping around. So I'm having these dips, and then I'm working my butt off to get back to where I was before. And that was tough. And I think that was my biggest mental challenge, was to try not to think about or get caught in that. It's kind of a depressive cycle, you know, because you feel like, why am I putting in all this effort just to get to, I don't know, mediocre? I don't want to say mediocre, but that's kind of what it felt like. So that was for me the biggest battle. And then a lot of it came down to, I guess, facing up to the fact that my lifestyle was really, it had a lot of holes in it. And there was a lot of things that I knew were not particularly good for athletes, particularly with my diet, because I was eating a lot of meat for a long, long time. And I had always, I guess, shooed away the idea of going more plant-based or trying to look into that. And so that was another big kind of obstacle for me, was saying, look, you know, you can go around in these cycles as many times as you want and feel sorry for yourself when you get to the bottom, and then pick yourself back up and then get back going again. But at the end of the day, if it's happening once a year, you have to address things. And that's really, I think, the biggest challenge, was just being very honest with myself and taking a step back and saying, look, if I want to really break through this and make some kind of positive change to this cycle, then there are things that I have to, you know, be honest about and that I have to fix. So yeah, you know, like a lot of people with health problems, they really embrace them. And as bad as certain things are, I feel like everything that happened got me to where I am now. And it's been very character building. And I think it's got me thinking about a lot of things that I wouldn't have considered if I hadn't been diagnosed, if I was still healthy. So, you know, there's gratitude along with the challenges.
One of the things that I admire in knowing some of your story and watching it, you know, from afar, realizing that there is a loop, right, that you've been caught up in where you get better, you do all the work and you get
Groundhog
better.
Day.
Yeah, right. And it goes back. And yet you've maintained the mental strength to believe, you know, that somehow, some way I can get there, instead of taking on the disease as an identity of this is just me, you know. And I really admire that. Is there anything in particular you might attribute that attitude of perseverance that's allowed you to, I mean, frankly, it's reflected in your entire life as far as I can tell, even with the table tennis stuff, but is there any certain thing that you attributed to that?
Yes. In the beginning, it's kind of a public denial. So there are some parts of it, obviously in private, you have to embrace everything that you need to understand about your health. But in public, I really try and focus on the fighting aspect of it and the building the right attitudes. Obviously, you know, I feel like autoimmune diseases, because they're so vast and there are so many different types, there isn't really a united front in terms of people really campaigning to support other people who have them. And so you kind of have to get to the point where you just wear it as a medal, and you know, it's not going anywhere. I know that, like, unless they find some unique way of managing to fix it, you have to take it and embrace the bad parts of it and learn how to deal with them, and then be grateful for all of the challenges that you've overcome and the things that you've learned. And so it really, you hear people with chronic illnesses talking about really embracing their illnesses. And I feel like in the beginning that was tough for me, but at the same time, having that first 3 months where I was really sick and I lost a lot of weight, and I was stuck in my apartment which is why this doesn't bother me now. I've done this plenty of times before. I was in my apartment for probably 2 or 3 months. I probably only left like 10 times. And the first thought pattern that I had, aside from how am I going to fix this, was, am I still going to be able to play my sport? What does this mean for me in terms of whether I'm going to be able to compete? What physical capability I'm going to have, you know, how this illness is going to affect me in terms of like the length of a season. And there was a little while where I felt that I had to give it all or nothing. So it gives you a unique perspective, you know, when you have these health problems, to say, look, I don't want to get stuck in an office. If I have an opportunity to do something that I really love doing, then I'm going to do it. And having that, it's kind of like, I've always felt that it's a challenge. I've always treated it as a challenge, and it's lingered there and said, you know, it kind of challenges me and saying, maybe you can't do this, maybe you can't do that. It's thrown relapses at me and been like, no, you know, you can have 4 months off in a year. So I think if anything, I've just used it to really fuel even more the passion that I already had. And so if anything, I would say defiance more than anything else, a very stubborn defiance not to let it have really the impact that it could have on me.
Well, there's so many things about your story that inspire me, but I mean, that's one of them, right? I can tell that you refuse to give up.
I do.
And that type of language is something that really resonates with me and things I've learned about life. And I've been fortunate I haven't dealt with something quite like this from a health standpoint. And so I look at you with just tremendous admiration. So I know there's got to be a lot of people out there. And let me say this real quick. For those that want to learn more detail about what Matt's story is, look for him on Instagram. We can post links to his Instagram, his Facebook. He's also got a blog. He's a great writer. and it's got a great blog, and he's worth reading. And boy, if you ever find yourself sort of stuck with some woe is me and some self-pity going on, you can read a little bit of Matt's work and maybe kind of realize and position how that is and better understand it. But Matt, I'm sure there's some folks that are curious. Tell us about your protocol. What do you think's the things that are really making a difference for you?
Well, I actually started with you. You guys were kind of the catalyst at the beginning, because I was starting to think a little bit more about what some small things that I could start doing were. And obviously, when you have issues that are happening with your body, you start thinking about supplements and deficiencies maybe that you're having with different vitamins or things in your diet. So I feel like it was such a chance meeting that we connected, and that I was in North Carolina and that you guys are based out of there, and we were able to meet. And that first conversation that we had, and you talked a lot about your company values and the direction that you guys wanted to head. And I felt at the time that it was something that I needed to align myself with. And yeah, it was a starting point for me. And having starting off with like the super green protein and just switching to a plant-based protein, and then having the green powder. Those were the two. They were like the first steps that I took in recognizing that if I wanted to get in better health, I needed to start looking inwards. And from there, I mean, obviously, part of the journey is making sure that you have good information. And I think that's one of the great things about you guys, not just from your platform, but as a family also, that you keep pumping out information for people to read that talk about different things like dealing with inflammation, and as simple as, making sure that you get enough sleep and things that might prevent you from sleeping well. So in terms of if I wanted to be a good athlete and I wanted to get myself in the right spot, I had to start looking at lifestyle. And so, yeah, I feel you guys were really the starting point to that. And from there, one of the key turning points for me was going to my specialists. And when I was in the surgery or the doctor's places, I kept returning high blood pressure. And so, we were wondering whether it was white collar hypertension, where I was just anxious, because obviously I'm relatively young, relatively speaking, quite young.
You're young.
To have high blood pressure. And that defiance and that stubbornness came back to provide the next step up, because they wanted to put me onto medication to control my blood pressure. And I'm not a fan of pumping my body full of chemicals. So if I have a headache, I don't take painkillers, and I never have. It's just something that I've always tried to deal with myself. And so I didn't want to add to the medication that I was already putting in my body. And so I watched some documentaries on Netflix. So I watched What the Health. Later on, I watched The Game Changers. And that really got me to that next level of starting to look at diet changes and expanding on the different supplements that you guys were providing. So I started trying some other ones like the Wellspring, and more recently the essential vitamins, and really just breaking down and analyzing all the different things that I could improve. And obviously the one that screamed out at me was, you have to stop eating so much meat. Like it was my diet was 90% meat, and that, looking back on that, and I mean, if my parents are watching this, they're gonna laugh at me, because they always told me that as well. But yeah, that was a big turning point. So changing to trying to eat more plant-based, and being stuck at home for 3 months and not going out to eat and not having restaurants has been perfect for that. So yeah, it's been a journey. But I really credit you guys for, I feel like you guys were the starting point. And when you're when you're trying to pick yourself back up after relapsing, and there were some really, really tough moments. So back in 2016, I relapsed after the World Championships, right before the Oceania Championships and the Olympic qualification. And I had to withdraw from those events because I was bedridden and there was no way that I could compete. So, but those are the times when you need people who can understand what you can do to help your body, and people that are really going out of their way to make sure that you're doing okay. And so, yeah, I feel like I've become a fringe member of your family. You guys are always reaching out to me and asking if I need anything or seeing how things are going. And I think that's really rare. And I'm obviously very grateful for it to have people who really take an interest in what I'm doing. And you guys have so much stuff that you're really busy with. So to take that time and be checking in on me all the time is certainly something that I've really appreciated.
Well, you're not a fringe member of the family. You are a part of the family. And
okay, good.
And feel that way. Hey, listen, let me just say I'm so proud of you, but I'm also just so happy for you to find yourself in this journey. And I know this is just the beginning of your journey. You are a very young man with a brilliant future in front of you, whether that's in Hollywood or at the table tennis table or wherever that happens to be. And I know it's going to be great. And we're very thankful for you to take some time today, but really, most importantly, speak candidly. There's a lot of people that will hear this or see this video, and they'll find themselves in there somewhere. And I know they're going to be inspired to do better if they can, right? And so thank you for doing that. Of all the things you said, one of the more genius things is you just didn't give up. And that's a big deal.
I won't. I definitely won't.
Well, listen, thank you. And I hope you're able to get back to your center soon there. I guess Denver's pretty close to opening up, and I'm sure you've got some people there that you work with that would love to see you and be able to get back to the sport. So I hope that happens very soon for you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It'll
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Eddie.
Yeah, you got it. Until next time, I'm Eddie Stone from the family room on the family ping pong table. And so we'll look forward to talking to you soon. Bye for now.